Welcome to Build Your Legacy, the CRE Playbook podcast, where we break down real deals, real strategies, real opportunities, along with education in commercial real estate. We're your hosts, Alex and Sarah.
With Beta Commercial Group and KW Commercial. And this show is designed for investors, developers, business owners, and agents who want to build long-term wealth through commercial real estate.
Let's get into today's play, because today we are doing a deep dive into something that, frankly, catches so many people completely off guard.
Oh, absolutely. It's the ultimate blind spot for most business owners.
Right. I mean, imagine this. You're signing a commercial lease here in Florida, right? You see a base rate of, say, $20 per square foot.
Sounds great on paper.
Exactly. You build your entire annual budget around that $20 number. You hire staff, you forecast your margins. And then out of nowhere, it's February, and your landlord slides a surprise envelope across your desk.
The dreaded February envelope.
Yeah, and it's an invoice for $25,000 due immediately. And it's just to cover, like, repaving the parking lot or a massive spike in property taxes.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's unpack this. What is actually going on here?
Well, what's happening is that commercial real estate just doesn't operate like residential. It is built entirely on the allocation of shared expenses.
Right.
And when the mechanics of those expenses aren't crystal clear, which, let's be honest, they rarely are, you end up with these catastrophic financial surprises.
Which is exactly why we're digging into a really comprehensive guide put together by Jack Batal. He's the director and lead agent over at our team, Beta Commercial Group.
Yeah, Jack did a phenomenal job breaking this down. His guide is all about understanding triple net fees and common area maintenance, which is usually just called CAM.
Our mission today is to decode the levers and pulleys behind those surprise invoices so you, the listener, can actually play defense during your next lease negotiation.
Exactly. And the source material emphasizes that understanding a triple net or an NN lease requires like a complete psychological shift in how you view rent.
Totally. Because you have to shatter the illusion of that initial quoted rate. You're essentially paying for your four walls, right?
Right. Your base rent only buys you access to the specific suite. Everything outside of those four walls, the whole ecosystem that allows your business to function, is billed separately through those three nets.
And just to clarify for everyone, those three specific pass-through expenses are property taxes, property insurance, and FAM.
Spot on. So your base rent plus your NNN charges equals your true effective occupancy cost.
I always compare it to buying a concert ticket.
Oh, yeah, the fees.
Right. You see a ticket for $50, you're like, awesome, I'm going to show. Yeah. And you go to check out and you get hit with the convenience fee, the venue fee, the cleanup fee.
And suddenly it's $120.
Exactly. But I really want to focus intensely on that third bucket today, the ACAM. Because taxes and insurance, while painful, especially here in Florida with insurance premiums lately, they are at least defined.
Yeah, you can look up a county tax assessment. You can ask for an insurance quote.
But CAM feels like the Wild West. And Jack's guide points out that people throw the terms NNN and CAM around interchangeably, but they are absolutely not the same thing.
Not at all. They are completely distinct. So CAM is the bucket reserved for the costs to operate, maintain, repair, and manage the shared portions of the property.
Give me a real-world example of that.
Well, say you're in a Tampa retail center. Your CAM is the landscaping company that keeps the palm trees looking good despite the humidity, right?
Yeah.
It's sweeping the massive parking lots, hiring security patrols, maintaining the exterior lighting.
Okay, that makes sense.
Taxes and insurance are separate line items. CAM is where the volatility lives because it involves literally hundreds of individual operational decisions made by the landlord over the year.
See, to me, that feels like a classic principal agent problem. The landlord is the one deciding to, hire the premium landscaping company or patch a pothole with the most expensive asphalt. But they aren't the ones actually paying for it.
The tenant is.
Right. From the tenant's perspective, it just feels like giving the landlord a blank check.
It's a huge friction point. But what's fascinating here is that we have to look at the underlying economic reality. From a landlord's perspective, SAM is not designed to be a profit center.
It's not.
No, it is strictly a reimbursement mechanism. The landlord is fronting the capital to keep the property functional and competitive. And since the tenants are the one actively generating revenue from that well-maintained environment, the costs are allocated across everyone. It's based entirely on shared benefit.
Okay, I mean, the logic makes sense on paper. I benefit from a well-lit parking lot, so I should help pay for the electricity. But where this falls apart for me is the actual math.
The math.
Yeah. If a landlord is taking all these variable expenses and chopping them up among the tenants, The most critical piece of leverage is the denominator. Like, how are they defining the total pie before they calculate my specific slice?
You are hitting on one of the most critical, heavily negotiated clauses in any commercial lease, your pro rata share.
Okay, so how does it usually work?
Let's use the example from Jack's guide. Say you lease 3,000 square feet in a 30,000 square foot center. You have a 10% pro rata share.
Simple enough.
Right. So the landlord creates an annual operating budget. Let's say total NNN expenses are estimated at $165,000 for the year.
Okay, so 10% of that is $16,500 annually?
Exactly. Divide that by 12, and you're paying an estimated $1,375 per month on top of your base rent.
Wait, but you said estimated.
Yes, because it's based on a budget. But before we get to what happens when the estimate is wrong, we have to talk about how they measure that 30,000 square foot building.
Oh, right. Rentable versus usable area.
Yes. A sophisticated tenant doesn't just ask what their percentage is. They ask how the total square footage is measured. If they use usable area, you only pay based on the space you physically occupy.
But if they use rentable area, suddenly I'm paying a percentage of the hallways, the lobbies, the utility closets. I assume most landlords push for the rentable standard.
Almost universally, yeah. They usually adhere to BOMA standards, which adds a load factor to your usable footprint. But Alex, the real danger isn't just the rentable versus usable distinction.
What is it?
The ultimate trap is what happens to that math when the building experiences massive vacancy.
Yes, this is exactly what I wanted to ask about. Let's say I lease space in a Miami strip mall. Hurricane comes through, damages the local economy, and 3 of the anchor tenants just go out of business.
Happens all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So the plaza is now 50% empty. If my pro rata share is based on the occupied space, my percentage of the CAM just doubled because the denominator shrank in half. Am I suddenly subsidizing the landlord's empty units?
If you sign a poorly drafted lease, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if the lease states your share is calculated based on the total occupied square footage, you will absorb a massive spike in costs the moment a neighbor moves out. The parking lot still needs sweeping, right? The security guard still needs to get paid.
But there are half as many tenants to foot the bill.
Yeah.
That seems incredibly predatory. I mean, my business didn't fail. Theirs did. Why am I taking on the financial risk of the landlord failing to keep their building leased?
You shouldn't. To protect yourself, you must insist on a gross-up provision. You want your pro rata share calculated as a fraction of the total rentable area of the building, regardless of occupancy.
Okay, so if the building is 100,000 square feet and I have 10,000, I am capped at 10% forever.
Exactly. If the building goes half empty, the landlord eats the 50% shortfall for those vacant units. They cannot shift the burden of the dark space onto you.
That is a crucial tip. But okay, even if I fix the denominator, there's still the day-to-day operations because like you said earlier, this is all based on a forecast.
Which brings us back to the February envelope.
The reconciliation surprise. Here's where it gets really interesting because the psychological shock for a small business owner is massive. They think their rent is fixed.
Right. So the year ends. The property manager closes their books, tallies up every actual invoice they paid, and compares the real-world total to the estimated budget. That's the year-end CAM reconciliation.
And if the estimate was wrong, let's say, going back to the math, actual expenses came in at $180,000 instead of the budgeted $165,000.
Then that 10% tenant now owes $18,000 for the year, but they only paid $16,500 in monthly installments.
So boom, they get hit with a sudden $1,500 shortfall bill.
Exactly. And the reasons for these surprises can be anything. Unexpected tax hikes, severe storms requiring debris removal, utility rate increases, or honestly, just poor initial budgeting by the landlord.
This raises an important question, though. How does a tenant possibly budget for an unknown variable that large? Especially in Florida, where insurance is just skyrocketing.
You have to fundamentally divide the CAM bucket into 2 distinct categories during negotiations. Controllable expenses versus non-controllable expenses. This is where your leverage is.
Let me guess. Non-controllables are the things the universe or the government dictates. Property taxes, municipal utilities, insurance.
Precisely. The landlord can't exactly call the city and haggle over the tax rate, so they pass that infinite risk down to you. You really cannot cap non-controllable expenses.
But controllable expenses, those are the operational choices.
Yes. The landscaping contracts, the janitorial services, property management fees. The landlord has the ability to get 3 different bids for these services. They have the power to negotiate.
So I want to force them to use that power. If I negotiate a cap on controllable CAM, say, my share can't increase by more than 4% year over year.
Hmm.
I'm basically forcing the landlord to price shop their vendors.
That is the exact mechanism. By securing a cap on controllables, you create a ceiling for your operational exposure. But you have to be incredibly careful with the legal phrasing here.
What do you mean?
Landlords will often try to make that cap cumulative or compounding.
Oh, I see. So if they only raise expenses by 2% this year, but my cap is 4, they bank that unused 2% and hit me with a 6% increase next year.
You got it. A cumulative cap allows them to catch up later. A non-cumulative cap resets every single year, regardless of historical spending. You always want to push for a non-cumulative cap.
Assuming we even agree on what should be in the CAM bucket to begin with,
Mm.
because Jack's guide highlights that inclusions and exclusions change wildly depending on the property type.
Oh, drastically. If you lease Class A office space, your CAM is heavily concentrated on interior shared spaces. You're paying for daily lobby, janitorial, elevator maintenance, centralized HVAC.
But if I'm leasing an industrial warehouse down in Orlando, I don't care about a lobby. My CAM should just be the heavy-duty truck courts, loading docks, maybe exterior drainage.
Right, which is why the single most heavily negotiated section of a lease is the list of CAM exclusions. You cannot just accept a broad definition of operating expenses.
You need a dedicated exhibit listing what they're forbidden from charging you for.
Exactly. And the biggest battlefield there is standard maintenance versus capital improvements.
Let's talk about that.
Oh.
Because if I'm just renting a storefront to sell shoes, I shouldn't be paying to build the landlord a brand new roof. That's their asset, not mine. It adds decades of equity value to their portfolio.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are hitting on the fundamental tension of commercial leasing. Standard maintenance like patching a leak is an acceptable pass-through,
Sure.
but replacing the entire roof is a capital improvement. Sophisticated tenants demand that all capital improvements are strictly excluded from CAM. You pay for the use of the asset, not the preservation of the landlord's principal.
But landlords have to have creative ways of blurring that line, right? What stops them from just patching a roof 50 times a year at an exorbitant cost and calling it standard maintenance?
Well, nothing stops them unless your lease addresses the useful life of an asset, but landlords will often argue for one major exception regarding capital improvements. Cost-saving technologies like installing a massive, highly efficient LED lighting system for the parking lot. The landlord will say, look, this is a capital improvement, but it slashes the electric bill by 40%. You benefit, so you should help pay.
Okay, I see the logic. But if that installation costs $100,000, I don't want a massive assessment in year 1 that wipes out my cash flow just to save a few $100 a month on electricity.
And that is where amortization comes into play. A fair compromise dictates that the cost of that improvement must be amortized over its useful life.
Oh, okay.
So if the lights have a 10-year useful life, they can only pass through 1/10 of the cost each year. The goal is that your annual share of the installation is completely offset by the annual utility savings.
That's a brilliant structural defense.
Yeah.
But there's another sneaky fee in the guide that feels less like a compromise and more like a pure cash grab. Administrative fees.
Oh, yes.
Landlords often just slap a blanket percentage on top of the total CAM bill for overhead, right?
Very common, usually 3 to 15% of the total CAM. They justify it by saying coordinating snow removal or landscaping requires administrative labor.
But wait, if I'm already paying a dedicated property management fee as a separate line item, aren't they just double dipping?
That is the exact loophole you have to look for. If your lease allows for a property management fee, you must explicitly exclude an administrative fee on CAM.
Wow.
Furthermore, if you do agree to an admin fee, ensure it is calculated only on the controllable CAM expenses, not taxes and insurance. It takes zero administrative effort to write a check to the tax assessor once a year. You should not pay a 15% markup on property taxes.
Okay, so what does this all mean? We've outlined gross-ups, disguised capital improvements, cumulative caps, double-dipped admin fees. How does a tenant actually enforce this? Say, I get the February bill and I suspect the math is wrong. How do I prove it?
You exercise your audit rights. This is the most powerful tool a tenant has, but you have to negotiate it before you sign. It gives you, or your CPA, the legal authority to demand access to the landlord's general ledger and actual backup invoices.
What is the accountant actually looking for?
Miscategorized expenses. Like, did the landlord charge the building's CAM for landscaping done at their personal house?
Does that really happen?
You'd be surprised. They also check if leasing broker salaries were illegally buried in property management payroll. They verify the square footage denominator.
Landlords must hate this.
Oh,
They
yeah.
probably put a ticking clock on it so you can't dig up old records.
They absolutely do. Usually you only have 30 to 90 days after receiving the reconciliation to formally request an audit. If you miss the window, the bill is legally binding, and you have to negotiate who pays for the audit.
Right. Because hiring a forensic CPA isn't cheap. If I spend $5,000 to find a $200 discrepancy, I've lost.
Which is why a well-crafted audit clause includes a penalty threshold. You stipulate that if the audit reveals the landlord overcharged you by, say, 5% or more, the landlord reimburses the cost of your CPA.
It keeps them honest during the initial budgeting.
Exactly.
Right.
The financial risk falls on them. And this boils down to transparency. Jack's guide outlines best practices for landlords, too, because hiding the ball creates adversarial relationships. If utility rates spike in June, landlords shouldn't wait until February to drop the hammer.
Reforecast and communicate.
Yes. When landlords provide clear definitions and proactive communication, tenants stay longer. Turnover is the highest cost for any landlord. Transparency reduces turnover.
So we highly recommend listeners contact an agent from our group to get a more in-depth deep dive on how to be successful in commercial investing or finding the right place for your business. You can check out our website at www.betacommercial.com. Again, beta is spelled B-A-T-A.
And we do want to reiterate a crucial point. This is educational. We are not giving legal or tax advice. Every lease is a unique legal contract. You must hire a qualified commercial real estate attorney and a CTA.
Trying to decipher a 50-page commercial lease without representation is just business malpractice.
Truly. The cost of a good attorney upfront saves you hundreds of thousands of dollars over a 10-year lease.
Absolutely. Well, we started today looking at the comforting illusion of a $20 price tag, and we've pulled back the floorboards on these operating costs. But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that is actively disrupting everything we just discussed.
The whole model is changing.
It is. The entire CAM model is built on shared benefit, dictated by physical square footage. But what happens when hybrid work severs the tie between square footage and actual usage?
That's a great point.
Right. If you lease 10,000 square feet of office space, but your employees only come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, your actual footprint on the building's resources has plummeted. You produce less trash, use less water, cause less wear and tear.
Yet, under the current model, you still pay for lobby maintenance 7 days a week.
Exactly. Simply because your lease says you occupy 10% of the building. The definition of shared benefit is fracturing. In the next few years, we might see tenants demand a total rewrite of common area maintenance, pushing for models based on daily utilization rather than static square footage. The math is going to change.
It's definitely something to watch.
If you found value in today's episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with someone who's serious about growing in commercial real estate. If you're looking to buy, sell, lease, or invest, or if you're a developer searching for your next opportunity, reach out directly. And if you're an agent ready to build your commercial business, let's connect. Until next time, go build your legacy.